Instead of preaching from a text, I'd just like to tell you a testimony, the story of our little church and the difference that it makes in the world. And I hope that telling you this will encourage you to think about missions and to think about it a little differently. And I'd like to begin by answering the question of that I know you were going to ask: can a small church make a difference globally? Can it really have a genuine impact on the world? You know, you just sang it. Didn't you? You know these great praise songs? They all say, "All the earth will shout your glory." You know what? We sing them. We don't even think about that. How's that going to happen? That's going to happen when we get involved. Let me tell you what happened. We're a small church, and show you who we are here. We average 160. If we're lucky, and that's counting all the babies in the nursery and the kids in childcare and all of that kind of a thing. We're landlocked in a suburban neighborhood. We've got 20 parking spaces and no room to go any bigger than that. We've been around. The church has been around since the 1920s. We go back to traditional roots. And so coming out of a kind of Baptist background and these dispensational roots and all this, we always supported missionaries. Church has always supported missionaries. And so it was just one of the many things that we did. Largely, we had quite a number of them. A number of them had gone out from us or from neighboring churches, and we supported them. And when they came to town, it was wonderful. We treated them like the good brothers and sisters they were, and we prayed for them and sent them back out. And they did their thing, and I did mine because I was a pastor, and I was right here, you know. And something happened. Something changed us. Way back in 1995, one of my elders, who was a WEC missionary, dropped me a copy of a magazine called Mission Frontiers, which comes from the U.S. Center for World Mission. And I began to read about things that I had never really known or understood before, and they really intrigued me. For instance, I began to understand that God sees the world in terms of people groups, ethnic groups, instead of political countries like I had been used to seeing that. And I discovered a concept that was new to me at that time, that God actually has a plan for all of human history, that God is on a mission. He's on a mission to reach each of the peoples that are on earth with the gospel and to bring to himself worshipers from each and every one of those people groups. Isn't that what the Great Commission says? I learned to read Matthew 24:14 and pay attention to it, where Jesus said, "This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world." That's the part we usually hear, but it says, "as a testimony to all the ethne," all the peoples, and then the end will come. And for the first time, back in 1995, I understood that, you know, Jesus has got a plan. That's why he sent us out to make disciples of all the peoples. And when that job is done, that's when he's coming. He wants the church to get the job done so that worshipers from all these people are there to gather around the throne. And that the Bible opened up in a new way to me. I could see it. I could see it all the way from Genesis in the life of Abraham, when God said, "And through you I'm going to bless" who? All the families of the earth. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. All the way to Revelation, where all the peoples are gathered around the throne of God. That same message goes from beginning to end, and it ties God's plan for what he's doing in the world together. It changed the way I read my Bible. It was really an eye-opening thing. You'll find it every place you look, and the Psalms are filled with it. Anyway, and then I discovered this. I learned that about a third of the Earth's population, some 2.9 billion people, have no realistic opportunity to hear the gospel because they live in unreached people groups. They live in people groups where there is no church planted, where there's nobody like you and your fellowship there to tell them about Jesus Christ. They have no opportunity. They have no thriving church. And today, there are still more than 7,000 of these unreached groups in the world. Most of them live in the 1040 window, that great swath of land that goes from Atlantic to Pacific, from 10 to 40 degrees north of the equator. And they are enslaved in the great religions of the earth, in Islam, in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in shamanism and witchcraft and all the other things that go on in that part. And one day I read this testimony in the magazine where there was a missionary who had been in Africa for 10 years. His name was Stan Yoder, and he'd served among a people named the Yalunkas. And after 10 years, he came back and was serving here in the United States because of a health crisis or something. And he went back to his home church, and he went to the missions committee. And he said, "Are you still praying for the Yoloncas?" And they looked at him, and they said, "No, we're praying for you over here in Pasadena." And he said, I had an eye-opening moment. In that moment, I realized that the church had adopted us and not the Yoloncas, who were the ones that were bound in witchcraft and animism and all that kind of a thing. And when I read that, God pointed his finger right at me and said, "That's you. That's you. You love missionaries." Like Dave. We've been friends ever since 1970, 1980-ish. You love missionaries, but you don't care. I realized I didn't care about the people who were lost, about the tribes that would never hear, about the people that were beyond the reach of the gospel. Didn't care about that. And I realized something had to change. And of course, I began to share some of this from the pulpit and share it with my missions committee and share it with key leaders in the church and that kind of thing. And together we realized we had to do something. We had to change. So how did we get started? Well, we took a simple step. Eventually, our missions committee came to the conclusion that we were going to adopt an unreached people where we didn't support a missionary so that we would learn to love the people without loving the Christian worker who was there. And so we set to figure out which group to choose. Well, we're pretty simple people, really. And a year or two before that, we had a missionary who visited us who was working in the country of Kyrgyzstan, a little place in the middle of Central Asia that we'd never heard of, where 4 million people live, and there was hardly any believers, and mountainous and snow-covered and all of that. And so we knew here was a people that we knew about. We had a connection to. I looked at the list. They were an unreached people. And we did a little research through what was back then dial-up internet. Anybody remember that? Okay, dial-up internet, and put out a call out there. I found out there are 4 churches in all of North America that had workers or knew of any kind of work in this little country. 4 churches, 5 million people, lost, and nobody doing anything about it, hardly. And we found an NGO that was trying to bring these churches together called Central Asian Partners. So we did the obvious. We chose the opportunity God put in front of our nose, and that's the principle that has led us to all the involvements that we have among the unreached peoples of the earth. And so we took it to our elders, and with their approval, we took it to our congregation. And in November of 1996, we stood before God and said, "We swear that we will do everything within our power to plant the church among the peoples of Kyrgyzstan and see it established there." And so we set out on this journey. So you say, well, what'd you do? How'd you involve your congregation? Glad you asked. Our first problem was being small and all. We had no money, right? That's the usual problem with smallness. You got no money. But, you know, you don't have to have money and you don't have to have size to love people. And so somewhere along the way, I read somewhere that one good way to help a people group was to start a newsletter about that people group. So I got myself on the prayer letter list for all the missionaries I could find that served in Kyrgyzstan at that time, which was a small amount, and started getting their prayer letters. And we started this newsletter. It's called the Kyrgyz Chronicle. And we started putting it together in June 1996, even before we adopted. We launched it. We started by putting it in our church building and mailing it to a few key contacts. Today it's got a circulation by email of 330 every month. It's read by every missionary in Kyrgyzstan almost. We have a Kyrgyz forum which passes on news about Kyrgyzstan, and all the folks that are interested in the network of churches that now care about Kyrgyzstan, everybody gets that, and so on. So a lot of it, I was able to use electronic media. I knew eventually somebody would have to visit. If we're going to adopt this people, somebody'd have to visit the people, but I really didn't think it was going to be me. But in April of 1997, I was offered the opportunity to participate in a short-term mission trip to Kyrgyzstan, all expenses paid. Well, when they tell you they'll pay for you, you pretty much have to say yes. So I went. Well, you know, I was scared to death. I don't know if you've been on a short-term trip, but this was a former communist country. The wall had just come down in 1991, and you know, you get down off of the on the tarmac, and there's these soldiers with AK-47s over their shoulder, and you're worried if they're going to let you back out of the country. It really was kind of a scary thing to do this. In fact, on the way to the airport, as we were leaving the country, I had stayed with a family there, and the daughter was a student like you in a university there, and the police stopped us as we're headed to the airport. And oh man, I'm stopped by the police, and what are we going to do? And she looks at me, sitting in the back seat of the car. She looks over at me, she says, "Not to worry, it is the job of the police to stop people and take money from them." So, and that's exactly what they do. That's how they earn their living. I got out. Anyway, that changed it from, hey, we're going to adopt an unreached people to, there are people there now that I know, that I have a relationship with, that I can interact with, and a couple of them had email, and I could write back and forth. And that prepared us. I went back, shared this with the congregation. And that prepared us so that in 1999, a team of 14 of us from the church went and did several things there in the land of Kyrgyzstan, came back and involved us even deeper. How did we involve the whole congregation? Well, we did all kinds of things. We've been back repeatedly, both as individuals and in teams many times since that. We've involved ourselves in all kinds of projects with the congregation. And finally, we prayed for about 10 years, and finally somebody from our church decided to go over there full time. And her name was Nancy. She's a retired nurse, and God put her on the field for about 3.5 years before she had to come home for medical reasons. And she still goes back pretty much every year and is involved in ministry there. And we've done everything, every kind of thing. We've done email pen pals. We've had Kyrgyz pastors in our pulpit. They've stayed in our homes. We've put stickers to remind people to pray, K stickers. We've sponsored children. We've sponsored Bible translation. Anything we can do to get Kyrgyzstan in front of our people, we did. For the last 4 years, I've been calling pastors in Kyrgyzstan. They're all young. They have, even though they may be older age, they're all young in the faith. They have no older, mature, older brother to kind of talk to them. So I've been calling pastors, 1 or 2 every week, spending about an hour on Skype, talking with a translator and just sharing with them. And what's happened? Well, by the estimate of one field worker, in 1995, there were less than 300 believers who were Kyrgyz in the entire country of 4 million people. You could fit every believer in the country that was Kyrgyz into our sanctuary and have half left over. And the only churches were in the capital city, about a dozen of them, and mostly with believers who were ethnic Russians and not Kyrgyz. Today, the church in Kyrgyzstan has grown to probably 40 to 50,000 believers, and with maybe 10,000 or more of them being ethnic Kyrgyz. There are several hundreds of churches that have been planted in every region of the country, plus numerous house groups that have not yet grown into churches. The Kyrgyz church has developed Bible schools, music ministries, youth ministries, summer camps, publications, and broadcasting media, and they're now beginning to train and send out their own missionaries. Now, I'm not saying that's all that we did that, but I'm saying that's what we've been able to be a part of and to see happen because we were willing to get involved, and between us and everybody else, it was a team effort that God used this whole group of churches, a whole group of missionaries all working together, and God moved and changed the country. And it's been exciting to watch. But the Kyrgyz are only one part of our journey, and I know you're dying to ask, well, what happened to all your other missionaries? What about your existing program? Did you just phase it out? And the answer is no. The majority of our long-term missionary partners were no longer working among groups that were unreached, but they were still doing valuable kingdom work. But we did, however, do 2 important things as a result of this new way of thinking. First of all, we deliberately changed the way we thought and talked about missions. Instead, we used to say, we support Debbie Palmer, who works in Mexico. Debbie Murphy, who works in Mexico. Now, and this is a page from our missions directory, we say, Glenside Bible Church is planting the church in the city of Puebla, Mexico. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it in partnership with our partner, Debbie Murphy. And we changed just the way we talked and the way we thought about all of our missionary involvements. We placed the focus on the people and began to formulate our prayer information that way instead of on the missionary. We set out to learn to love the people we were already touching through our existing missionary partnerships. And the second thing that we did was to ask God to deliberately give us ways to expand our footprint among unreached peoples. Well, how did we do that? I'm glad you asked. Have we done that much in the same way we started? As opportunities came our way, we made deliberate additions to our program that increased our footprint that way. As older partners went home to glory and some money became available, we turned around and shoveled that towards unreached people groups. For instance, one of our long-term families, this is Dan and Barbara Luno. Dan and Barbara Luno, I don't know if you've ever read Peace Child. Do you know about the Sawi, Don Richardson, the whole story of the conversion of the Sawi tribe of headhunters? Yeah, maybe not. That's my generation. But anyway, in the 60s, Dan was a Hitler youth, and God brought him to America, saved him, sent him to Moody, and sent him out to the mission field to Irian Jaya, to a tribe called the Sobe, who are neighbors to the Sawi, who used to be headhunters. In their 30-plus years of ministry, 12,000 Sobe people. Today there are 10,000 baptized believers among the Sobe tribe. And we're a part of that. For 30 years, we supported them. We helped to change the future of an entire people, but the reason I tell you this is they start to send out their own missionaries, and one of them is named Urias, and he and his wife are the first missionaries sent out by the Sobe people. And they went to the Irarutu, who live in the lowlands of what's now called West Papua, part of Indonesia, and there's no travel there except by water, and they're planting the church among unreached peoples in the lowlands, and they travel by boat. Travel by boat. If you can raise your food in a garden, you can make your own clothing, you can subsist off the land, but if you're going to travel, you need a boat. And if you're going to travel in a boat, you need a what? Motor. And if you need a motor, you need gas. And where do you get money if you live in a primitive society? So we're able to be a partner. We send him money to buy gas for his boat so he can go be an evangelist and reach unreached people up there. And we're praying for unreached peoples in these areas of West Papua. It's exciting. Here's another lady. Her name is Pari. Pari's from India. And we met her back in 2000 because of our connection to Kyrgyzstan. She felt a call from God to go reach the Kyrgyz who live in the northwest of China. There are 250,000 Kyrgyz over there that nobody cares about, nobody'd been to, nobody'd ever taken the gospel to them in all these years. And she felt called to go, this young Indian lady. And so we partner with her. She went, she's a student. She's been a language student for 7 or 8 years now. They keep giving her visas and she keeps studying because it lets her be there and she can reach out to Kyrgyz students in the city of Urumqi. And she carries a debit card from Susquehanna Bank in Glenside, Pennsylvania with the name John Kless on it. That's how she gets her money because we handle it. What can we do? We can't do much. We give her a small little bit each month, but those people that give to her send the money to us, and we have a volunteer who deposits it in the bank account and makes sure it gets transferred and she can get her money through. We are reaching the Kyrgyz of northwest China through that partnership because God put it in our laps. The most exciting thing that we are involved in lately that he's led us into in recent years is a partnership with a tiny church of about 80 people on the southeast coast of India, in the city of Nellore. And this little church is called Hebron Believers Assembly, and they got a vision to reach an unreached people group. India, by the way, has about 2,200 of those, to reach one all by themselves, this little church. And the tribe is called the Yanadi, and since 2007, when they began, there were a handful of Yanadi believers. They have raised up, God has raised up through them, 27 Yanadi evangelists who go to their own people. Each one of them is working to get into 5 villages. They're in over 80 villages already, and they have planted more than 30 little churches. Some of them have kind of hard sides. Other ones are thatched roof and thatched sides or no sides. Some of them meet under a tree. Some of them meet in a house. And we've been there twice now. We've sent short-term teams, and it was a privilege. I was just there in August, and we held the first ever conference for all Yanadi believers, and 450 people showed up. 450, they expected 200. 450 people showed up. We had the privilege of telling them all the stories of the Old Testament. They're an oral people. They don't read and write. They'd never heard Abraham, Noah, nothing. We told them all the major stories of the Old Testament in a day and a half. What a privilege. Went to 7 villages. Saw about a dozen people receive Christ, got to baptize 13 of them in a river. It was just exciting to be there. And I talked with Pastor David from the main church every week, every other week. I circulate an electronic prayer letter for him here, and we just have this ongoing involvement. God keeps opening these little doors for us to make a difference with very, very little money. Together we have 21 Western partnerships with Western missionaries. We have 8 partnerships with nationals or national organizations who are serving among their own or reaching out to another people. We continue to pursue the Kyrgyz, as I've mentioned, and we send out 2 or 3 short-term teams every summer to the connections that we have on the field. Our total budget this year, 2013, was $333,000. If you're from a big church, that's a drop in the bucket. But this year we gave $101,000 to missions. And 30+ thousand of that was over and above what was regularly budgeted. We have really come to believe this. All the nations you have made will come and worship before you. They will. And I want to be a part of that. We're only a little church. We're just nobody. We're not important that way. But when you make yourself available, God will use you, especially if you want to get involved. He has a place for everybody to get involved in reaching the nations of the earth, reaching the peoples of the earth, that they might be there around the throne that day.